the fumble. Goes crashing into the end zone.
It is intercepted by Jalen Ramsey.
Robert Wood, touchdown.
Picked off by John Johnson.
Touchdown, Tyler Higbee. Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air.
Henderson with a good run and a first down, still on his feet. Touchdown, Van Jefferson. Everett in stride. Wow!
To the end zone. Kingmakers. LA will play for the Lombardi.
Breaking news. This important PSA is brought to you by Manscaped.com. This is your pubic service announcement and the news you've all been waiting for. The Manscaped engineering team has confirmed that they've successfully created the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is now available for purchase in the USA and Canada. This new trimmer was just released only moments ago, and we are one of the first to get our hands on it and share the news. Join over 2 million men worldwide who have trusted Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off using the code DTR and free worldwide shipping at manscaped.com. All right, guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I'm your host, Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co-host, Jake Ellenbogen, and we are coming to you after the 2021 NFL Draft, which is something that we were talking about for a very long time, and it finally happened. And Jake and I were live during the whole draft. We had a really fun live stream that I know a lot of you tuned into, and we talked to you guys live. And Jake, our reactions to all of the Rams picks did happen, obviously, live. We also released, Jake released on his YouTube channel a cut-up of our reactions to every pick that the Rams made. So you might have already seen that, but we are going to break down for you the Rams picks here and just give our brief thoughts. But Jake, it's finally here. Like, the draft happened, which is like, there was so much anticipation. We were all waiting for it, and now it's over, and it's already like, what now? We have 120 days till the season starts.
No, I know it's pretty crazy. And, when you think about it, it's just like, it takes all this time and everything. Like, you go through all the motions and, first off, us just planning our setup and how we were going to do it. And then, you planning coming out to New York and just even past just the planning of the show, just all the different tape and film that we watch of all these players and ranking them. It's just, it's this long process, and then it ends in like seconds. It feels like it just goes by so fast. And I know, except on day 3, that does feel like an eternity, but it is over, like you mentioned, and it's cool to see everyone on their respective teams. I'm sure you have some favorites all along the NFL on different teams. I myself have some favorites. I will say my opinions haven't entirely changed, but I definitely like the draft more than I did, leaving that studio after day 3. I don't know about you. I love the Chris Garrett pick. I mean, we'll get into each pick, and I think maybe that's how we'll just break it down. But I think every pick has grown on me in a sense. I still don't think that the Rams drafted bad players. I think when we had an issue with picks, it was because of who was available and who was chosen over those players that were available.
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone who watched us, which, like I said, a lot of you tuned in, you watched, you saw our reactions, especially earlier in the drafts, to some picks that the Rams made. And I know that since then we both kind of seen some more film, we've seen some more videos, heard more reaction. And I think you're right. I think it's gotten less bad, like from a Rams fan's perspective, as time's gone on, but I still really don't like it, if that makes sense. I still don't quite understand it. Let's start off with Tutu Atwell, 57th overall pick in the second round. The Rams drafted Tutu Atwell, the wide receiver out of Louisville. And Jake, the first thing that's surprising to me about this pick is position. I would have thought wide receiver would have been the last position that we would go in the second round. It just isn't a quote unquote need for us. And it isn't something that I felt anyone there truthfully was someone that I really wanted in the second round at wide receiver. And then secondly, if you're going to go wide receiver in the second round, Tutu Atwell was surprising to me. There was a lot of other receivers there that I mean, if we were going to go receiver, which again, I didn't think we needed, but if we, for whatever reason, were going to take a receiver, there was a lot of other guys that I would have liked. But Jake, I want to hear your thoughts on that. And I also want to point out and ask you if you believe this to be true, but the theory was that the Rams wanted to take Dwayne Eskridge out of Central Michigan or Western Michigan, with this pick, and that the Seahawks took him. So then they went with Tutu Atwell. But again, both of those guys still don't make sense for me or really fill a need for the Rams. But what were your thoughts on this pick?
Yeah, I think, you kind of touched on it, but this pick is only made in a sense where you feel like you have a luxury in general. And you don't make luxury picks unless you feel like your team is really well kept and everything. And I feel like the Rams ultimately feel like they're a Super Bowl team as is, on draft day. And so they ultimately decided to go out and get a guy they fell in love with in Tutu Atwell. Look, this is not a pick that would have happened had Jared Goff been under center. I don't even know if this is a pick that happens if Wolford's under center. I think this is them getting really excited at the potential of just being the most dominant offense in the league with Matthew Stafford. I feel like that's ultimately what their plan is. I could be wrong, but I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to be, the top offense. They're trying to, kind of transcend everything we've seen. And they're going 5 deep here. You could argue Skorenek is kind of, falling under the radar a little bit. And so is, of course, the guy that they got a little bit later that we'll talk about, Jacob Harris. But they're super loaded at the wide receiver spot. Now, Tutu Atwell, I just put up a video on my YouTube about him, but Atwell essentially is going to be a gadget guy to start. This is a long-term move. And the thing is, Eskridge is 23, 24 years old. Atwell is 21. So I actually don't agree, and I don't buy into the fact the Rams got scooped with Eskridge. I think they liked Eskridge, but it sounds to me like they really just fell in love with Tutu Atwell. I know it makes for good headlines, and it's kind of funny, like they panicked, so they took Tutu Atwell. But to be honest with you, I believe them when they say this is one of the highest grades they gave to a player. And look, I'm not necessarily saying that Atwell was worthy of that. As you know, he's a 6th round grade on my board. But that's because when you're grading players, it's about what they're bringing to the NFL. And I didn't really look past 3 games with him. I just finished my 9th game, and then I put out that video. And I can tell you, he actually could surprise as early as this year. The big thing with Tutu Atwell is very simple. He had horrendous quarterback play in 2020. 2019, very, very good quarterback play. That was Malik Cunningham's best season. 2020 he fell off, and then Atwell, of course, got hurt towards the end of the year and opted out. And I think that's the reason you could say, didn't go early 2nd, maybe even 1st round. I wouldn't have picked him that high personally, but I'm just telling you that I know this league values speed. They've now watched Tyreek Hill in the Super Bowl back-to-back seasons. I think teams are starting to really feel like they want a piece of that, and I think that's ultimately what the Rams decided to do.
Yeah, I just think it's a terrible strategy. I just think, and I'm not trying to hate, because this isn't about me hating on Tutu Atwell. It's more just the strategy, like the draft strategy. And I know this is when everyone comes in and they're like, oh, well, good thing you're not a GM, as if everyone else, 99% of Rams Twitter isn't saying the same thing. I just feel like in the 2nd round, it's not a time, unless it's like a quarterback, to pick long-term. It's just, especially when you have other needs. Like the Rams are not a team that just had no needs. Like that, like if we had depth at every position, but like our offensive, and we'll talk about this later, our offensive line, we have terrible depth at right now. And, that's not even technically where I wanted to go in the 2nd round, but that would have at least made sense. I just think position wise, like we wasted a 2nd round pick on a gadget guy who's a deep threat, probably only going to be used in that way. And we literally signed Deshaun Jackson. And I know that Deshaun Jackson isn't expected typically to last the entire season, but we have other receivers who can do that. So I still don't understand this pick. I just felt like it was wasted. And again, there's like other guys that you could have taken there, like a Terrace Marshall was literally right there. He got picked 2 picks later.
I'm with you there.
Diami Brown, Amari Rogers, Josh Palmer, Nico Collins, Anthony Schwartz, like all these guys that were graded so much higher. And Des Fitzpatrick, also from Louisville, was there. So yeah, that was honestly, like one of my least favorite picks by the Rams in this draft. I just think it made no sense. And I think you're right. I think that the Rams are really trying to go all in and just create this really flashy offense, which I think is a mistake in their strategy when you have other needs. I mean, if we have any injuries on the offensive line, it's kind of like, can Tutu Atwell play guard? Or I think it's a bad strategy. And again, I'm not alone in that. Like this was a very poorly rated pick from people, Rams fans and non-Rams fans alike. I mean, if you Google the Rams draft, it's very poorly rated.
Yeah, I agree with that to an extent. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I do think the Rams, and I can understand it. I don't agree with it, but I can understand their rationale, is that they spent a lot of, draft capital on offensive linemen. And I would be totally hypocritical to say that they should just move on from these guys when I'm constantly preaching development. They get Evans in the 3rd round in 2019. They got Ankrum in the 7th round in 2020. They go out and they get Austin Corbett from Cleveland. They give up a 5th round pick to get a guy that was the 33rd overall pick in his respective draft. Then they get Brian Allen in the 2018 4th round, Jamil Demby 2018 6th round, David Edwards 2019 5th round, Noteboom a 3rd round pick in 2018. And then Alaric Jackson is an interesting one because they got him as a UDFA and they paid him quite a lot to keep him. He also got drafted in the 2nd round, the CFL draft. Looks like he's going to stay in the NFL. And he has a chance to compete, coming out of Iowa. Now, I guess the reason I bring that up, Havenstein also being a 2015 2nd rounder, this is kind of the way they've decided to go about the offense. And I don't really have an issue with it if it works out. I think Noteboom's good. I'm higher on him than you are, of course. Evans, I don't know where I'm at, to be honest. It's very hard to tell, but he also was drafted in 2019, so I can't just throw him away already. Ankrum, I love Ankrum because he's a 7th round pick, and I feel like they got tremendous value out of him. I like him long term. My thoughts on Brian Allen, but I would make the argument as far as playing devil's advocate here. I think Les Snead and company, who have spoken highly of Brian Allen, I think they think that this is somebody that they really want to develop. And when you look at the resume, he's kind of had a bad stretch. Like, he had a freak injury that cost him all of the season he was going to start in 2019. And then 2020, he has COVID and then has like severe complications to the point where he couldn't even play all season long and was pretty much a healthy scratch towards the end of the season. So I think with that rationale, seeing a guy like Austin Blythe go out the door, I think they probably just expect Brian Allen to compete. I don't necessarily think he'll be the starting center, but when you take that into account, they feel like even though it was in 2018, and even though he's not the best guy, I think they still feel like they've done enough on the offensive line where they want to kind of ride it out and see what they have. And they had a draftable grade on Alaric Jackson, so they didn't feel like they didn't draft an offensive lineman because they feel, in a sense, that they got Jackson. So I understand entirely, feeling like they have needs, because I myself felt like they had a need at linebacker that they somewhat addressed, but could have gotten somebody better. We'll talk about in a little bit. But I think in terms of Tutu Atwell, it was clearly a best available pick, and it was a guy that they liked all along. I don't know if necessarily he was a guy that they would have traded up for, but I know he was a guy that obviously they would take at 57. It feels weird, but I'm going to let them do their thing because, I like the player. I don't like the pick, but I think the player is going to be a lot better than that pick, if that even makes any sort of sense. So we will get to that right after we take this break. But a word from Alexis about Manscaped.
Spring has sprung and Manscaped has the best tools to get you ready. Manscaped are the global leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming and have forever changed the grooming game with their amazing products. They are here to help with your above-the-waist holes, too. Have you heard of their Weed Whacker? This nose and ear hair trimmer provides proprietary skin-safe technology, which helps prevent nicks, snags, and tugs in those delicate holes. No more gross nose hairs flying in the wind. The premium Manscaped Weed Whacker uses a 9,000 RPM motor-powered 360-degree rotary dual-blade system. Manscaped is making whacking your weeds a time to look forward to, delivering maximum confidence while providing hygiene. Speaking of incredible hygiene, Manscaped has formulations to keep you fresh and ready for everything that comes your way all day. The Crop Preserver is an anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer. It's starting to get hot outside, and this is crucial so your balls stop sticking to your leg. That's the legit worst. You'll also find the Crop Reviver, spray-on toner for your balls, which will keep you smelling fresh down there just like spring flowers. Speaking of smelling fresh, complete your grooming game this spring with the new refined cologne Signature Scent by Manscaped. This stuff is legit and will have you smelling like royalty. The cologne is light, approachable, and gentlemanly in all the right ways. You'll be the talk of the next quarantine hang. Smell good, feel good this spring. Get 20% off plus free shipping using code DTR at manscaped.com. Do yourself a favor and always use the right tools for the job. Yeah. I followed what you were saying. I mean, it took me a second, but we got there. Yeah, but okay. And guys, we're about to get into the next pick. I promise I won't be negative anymore after this pick because I know the whole spiel is Alexis is so negative. She doesn't like anything that Snead does and doesn't worship the ground that he walks on, which you're right. But after this pick, it's going to get better because the Rams started to do better, in my opinion, after this. But I can't pretend to like this pick. I just can't. I'm sorry. But I want to give you a warning. So fast forward like 2 minutes or something if you don't want to hear me talk about the Rams' next pick. But okay. The next pick by the Los Angeles Rams, I am looking at a chart trying to find. The chart that I'm looking at literally deleted it. So I don't remember which pick it was overall, but like I'm looking at the official website and they skipped over the Los Angeles Rams pick here.
Well, it was pick 103 with their compensatory pick
there it
that
is.
they got.
Put it in a different
Fowler.
section. Okay. So the Rams picked at 103rd overall in the third round. This was a comp pick at the end of the third round. The Rams picked linebacker Ernest Jones from South Carolina. And again, fast forward if you don't want to hear me talk about this pick, but Jake will say the same thing. I know that we are very much on the same page about this. Both Jake and I had 7th round grades on Ernest Jones. And again, I know what you're thinking. Well, you guys aren't scouts. You're not GMs. It doesn't matter. A lot of scouts actually also had 7th round grades on Ernest Jones. This was someone who wasn't really on my radar. I do think the Rams did meet with him at least once, but I just didn't see this happening, at least in the third round. Now, position-wise, great. I wanted the inside linebacker for the Rams. I felt like we were lacking in depth there. Great. The player, I'm just not really sold on at all. So this was very surprising. And again, had this been a pick in the later rounds, I would have said, not really a big fan of the pick because of the player, but I understand it. I don't understand it in the third round. And yeah, I just don't. Jake, do you have anything to add on to that? Jake is usually like the silver lining guy. So
well,
I don't like, I mean, here's the thing, like the Rams very strongly have stated they want him at inside linebacker because
I mean, he should,
that's
because,
where he's,
that's
where he best fits. But like throughout the rest of the draft, you and I were like hoping they would pick up another guy. But then we started to realize like the Rams came out and they're like, no, like we want him as our, like he's the guy. And then you and I were like, because there were some other guys that we liked that were still available at inside linebacker.
Like letting the New England Patriots get Cameron McGrone in the 5th round.
Right. Well, like here's like just for example of some other guys that weren't picked yet at the time of this pick. Baron Browning, who was picked like 4 picks later. Derek Barnes out of Purdue. Jabril Cox out of LSU. I'm scrolling here. Buddy Johnson out of Texas A&M, who I actually really wasn't that high on either, but you know, whatever. Tony Fields out of West Virginia, Garrett Wallow out of TCU. There's so many guys that were still there. So again, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, if you're going to go that position, I mean, my God, there's so many people there that I would have expected before him. But again, this is probably just a case of the Rams found someone that they really liked and they went for it.
Yeah, you know, look, 6'2", 230 pounds. You know, this guy, they're comparing to Micah Kaiser. I mean, you have Micah Kaiser on the roster. That actually kind of concerns me. It does tell me that they're probably not very high on Micah Kaiser because they like his ability, but he can't stay healthy, which I've only been saying that for 3 years. But anyway, he's going to be a guy that helps them as far as having a true thumper in the middle. He's got, you know, great football mentality, great football IQ. The fact of the matter is with him is that you got a guy who wasn't as athletic as the bunch, and to me wasn't as productive, and to me is not. I mean, he's a good tackler, but like you had an opportunity, and keep in mind, you know, Raheem Morris basically got to coach Dion Jones. Dion Jones is pretty much always what I think about when I think about a linebacker, the new age linebacker, almost like a safety, sideline to sideline, that 4.4 speed. This is more of a 4.7 speed guy, which that's what like Corey Littleton ran, which, I mean, he played faster than that, but I don't feel like Jones plays faster than a 4.7. They said GPS wise he did. He does look to me like he does lumber a little bit. I'm not saying he's slow, but I also don't think that he's like an ultra athletic type of guy. And when you watch Cameron McGrone, he takes the best angles in the entire draft. He's somebody that really does a nice job of diagnosing the run, ripping through the B gap and making a play. I really like him. Then Baron Browning, who's just an absolute elite athlete. I don't know how you pass up on him. More productive. I just think basically he's a below average athlete that the Rams drafted, and they got a guy that has, you know, great leadership, and he's going to be an old school thumper. But look, this is somebody that I expected to go to the Rams. I just didn't like the pick in the 3rd round. He fits exactly what they look for in their linebackers. And really what I think they wanted to do is they wanted to add some variation in their linebacker room. Now, getting the guy that is compared to a guy that you already have isn't the greatest variation move. But here's the thing. I think they liken him to Micah Kaiser. That means I think they're replacing Micah Kaiser with him in the starting lineup. And I think Troy Reader is going to get replaced by Traven Howard, who was on track to be the starter last year. He's coming back from a season-ending injury. And I think that they want Traven Howard to be that kind of do-it-all, former safety turned linebacker, cover tight ends, cover the running backs. And then they want basically, Ernest Jones to just be that guy that, you know, makes a mess up front. When a guy gets past, you know, the offensive line, he breaks through, ball carrier, you know, he lays the wood. And I feel like that's kind of what they see in him, a guy that's just going to set the tone and, you know, be that thumping tackler. But I do think that's what they were thinking there. That's why they didn't go out and get, I mean, I don't know how to really explain how they would pass up on all that talent, but I'm assuming that's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And listen, I hope I'm wrong about Ernest Jones. I hope I'm wrong about Tutu Atwell. Like, it's totally not about them personally, which you understand because we talked about this live. Like, when we say we don't like picks, it's not like, oh, man, I hate that guy. Usually it's more so about, like, value and, like, it's a little bit about them and, like, what we feel their skill set is. And, like, you know, we can watch them and be like, I don't think that they're good enough for a 3rd round pick per se, but it doesn't mean I don't want them to succeed. But I just felt like you mentioned, literally Baron Browning was taken 2 picks later by the Broncos, right there. And I feel like that's just something that happens with the Rams a lot. Like, they make these picks and people are like, but the other guy was right there. People from the Rams Twitter, I guess, and draft Twitter alike. But okay, guys, the next pick I'm going to be better about because I liked this pick. And I like this. Well, I should say I like this pick more than when it happened, because when it happened, it was quite a shock to Jake and I. If you go back and watch our reaction, like, we didn't necessarily love it. And again, like if I'm grading this pick, I'm probably giving it like a B- or like a C+, honestly. So when I say I love it, I'm not like, this was the most amazing pick. But I liked it a lot better than the first two by far. So at 117th overall in the fourth round, the Rams selected Bobby Brown III, defensive tackle, Texas A&M. Now, this is kind of like does a flip-flop from the past pick, because the last pick when we picked Ernest Jones, I liked the position, I didn't like the player. This pick, I like the player, but I don't necessarily like the position that they went. So I felt like in the fourth round, defensive tackle is fine for the Rams. I do feel like we have depth there already. So that was a little bit surprising to me. And also there was a couple other players that Jake and I talked about that I liked better than Bobby Brown. But then again, if I think about it, I'm like, well, it's okay because we have so much depth there that Bobby Brown can develop a defensive tackle. He's not someone who has to start right away. I think some guys that we mentioned at the time that he was picked were like Tyler Shelvin out of LSU was there. Tommy Tagai out of Ohio State was there. I can't think of who else was there. I'm looking. But yeah, I mean, I like this pick. I really like, it was Darius Stills out of West Virginia is who I was thinking of. But I like this pick. I was kind of like indifferent on it when it happened. I'm starting to like it more. The only thing, again, that is like slightly confusing to me is the position. And we have so many guys there. I mean, obviously Aaron Donald, Sebastian Joseph Day, Sean Robinson, Aaron Banks, not Aaron Banks, Eric Banks. Yeah. Who else is slipping my mind right now? Another guy there. But Jake, what did you think about this pick? And has it grown on you more than when it first happened?
Yeah, I'm really excited to deep dive into his film, do a video on him. I think when the pick was made, I was in shock, but there's also because guys like Davion Nixon, Darius Stills, like you mentioned, Tommy Togiai, like you mentioned, like I just felt like they could have gotten a better value there. But in the fourth round, that's kind of where Bobby Brown, that's where I had him graded. And a lot of people had him as a third round grade. So in a sense, this was a good pick. This is somebody that's simply going to replace Michael Brockers. He isn't going to be 21 until August. So right now he's 20 years old. They're getting a guy, like you said, that can kind of sit behind. And I mean, he's still going to have a role this year, but he's going to have a role behind a guy like Ashawn Robinson, who's in a contract season, a guy like Sebastian Joseph Day, who now the Rams have leverage on Sebastian Joseph Day. Instead, if they try to make a play on him and sign him long-term, he's not going to be like, I'm the only one you have. They'll just be like, well, we have, Greg Gaines and, now we have Bobby Brown III. So it helps with that. It helps with a lot of things, adds more depth. They really need another guy to continue doing what they did last year because they wanted Brockers back. This is them going out and getting just a total injection of energy, though, because if you watch this guy play, he's a monster. And when he, imposes his will in the backfield, you see it. You feel his presence. The entire team does, and they rally around that. And I think this is somebody that's going to be big for their defensive line. He may make, some splash plays here and there and not have a huge role in his, first season, but this is somebody moving on. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up becoming a really good player down the line.
For sure. I mean, the talent is definitely there, the potential. Okay, next pick. Still in the fourth round. The Rams at 130th overall picked Robert Rochelle, cornerback out of Central Arkansas. And this is my favorite pick by the Rams in the draft. This was the only pick that Jake and I loved actually. Like if you watch the thing, like this is the only one that we loved initially. Like there was no question in our mind when this pick happened. We really, really liked him, this pick. Even though this pick was like slightly higher than I think you and I both imagined it happening, we just didn't care because we like Robert Rochelle. So we were like, no problem. Position wise, great way to go. Player, great way to go. And, Robert Rochelle obviously is a small school guy. I mean, Central Arkansas. Not entirely too many draft prospects coming from that school, so it's all the more impressive that he has stood out the way that he has. And I think that he's going to make an impact right away and be playing right away. And something that Jake and I said on the live stream is this pretty much cancels out David Long. I think that this pick is kind of like the Rams saying that they realize that the David Long experiment isn't going to work out. And they really like the trio of Jalen Ramsey, Darius Williams, and Robert Rochelle. So yeah, Jake, I mean, what were your thoughts like in depth about this?
Yeah. So, that of course was, live. And then I went back and I was like, you know what? I think they might actually give David Long a shot. I think this is more so about Darius Williams. I think they kind of are, they're preparing for the worst with Darius Williams. I think they expect him to have a really good season, with Jalen Ramsey again, and he's going to leave. And I think a lot of that is going to be the Rams deciding not that Darius Williams isn't a good player, but it's going to be like the Aaron Donald effect with the pass rushers. You saw it with, Dante Fowler, you saw that. And I think obviously they brought back Leonard Floyd, but I feel like it's going to be a point where we have Jalen Ramsey. We can go out and get whoever we want to be aside from him. And playing next to Jalen Ramsey is going to boost your, productivity. And so I felt like that was kind of the reason going back and like really diving into it. David Long, it would be like if they gave up on him, then why are they giving, the offensive line so many chances? So I feel like they're trying to save face with that pick. It was a 3rd round pick. And I don't know because I didn't know you yet, but I might have. Yeah, I think they picked him and I did know you. That's right. I didn't like the pick, if you remember. So I wasn't super high on David Long, but they're probably trying to salvage him as a nickel corner. This is somebody in Rochelle that will play on the outside. This is somebody that only played 1 snap at nickel, so I do think that's where David Long is going to have to win, because I don't think the Rams are going to pursue David Long to take over for Darius Williams. I think this would be Rochelle's job to lose. He's a freakish athlete. He has crazy size, to the point where one scout even said that, like, even just on his measurables alone, I would draft him, not even having to look at his tape. So, somebody that had 12 career, takeaways. So, you're getting ball hawking type of talent. He's very explosive, and he ran the 4.4s. You're getting a really speedy corner, but a guy that has size and is going to be able to play in like that cover 3 type of, that disguise coverage. If they still go ahead and they use what Brandon Staley was using last year, they try to emulate that. I think he's perfect for this. Was surprised the Chargers didn't go after him, but I think this is, like you said, this is probably the best pick of the draft. This was just an A++.
Yeah, for sure the best pick by the Rams by far. And I agree. I think people who might not be familiar with him are definitely going to really like him once they see him play. But okay, next pick was a comp pick in the 4th round. So at the end of the 4th round, 141st overall, the Rams selected Jacob Harris, wide receiver / tight end out of the University of Central Florida. I believe, and there's some debate about this, but I believe that the Rams are going to use him as a tight end. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that is. I don't necessarily think that they've even decided. But this was a pick that I was unfamiliar with. I truly did not see any film on him. I did not know who he was, which is something pretty unusual for both of us when you are that early in the draft. I know that Jake was familiar with him. So I was confused when this pick was made. I couldn't really speak about Jacob Harris then because I didn't really watch anything on him. I had no idea about him. The position, though, was a little infuriating because I didn't see why we taken. I didn't think we need a receiver tight end at all. And then we take one in the 2nd round, then we take one again in the 4th round. So, and I stand by that. I still am not a fan of this pick position wise. But I think that Jacob Harris is very talented. And as the Rams said, there's a lot of special teams value in him. Like that is actual quote from the Rams, but I don't understand why we were taking special teams value in the 4th round. I feel like that's something you do later on in the draft. So who knows? They might just be looking at him as a special teams guy. I mean, we have Higbee and Hopkins at tight end, and Johnny Munt. So again, nothing against Jacob Harris. As an athlete, he's a freak of nature. But he is kind of a gadget guy. He is kind of someone who you think might end up on special teams. But Jake, what were your thoughts on the Jacob Harris pick then, and what are they now?
So then I was annoyed because I kept hearing over and over again how the Rams would take Jacob Harris. And I just kind of was like, well, I was thinking like you were, why are we going to take another receiver? And that was before the Tutu Atwell pick. So I was just annoyed in the moment. But going back, I'm really excited to do a video on him because I won't be surprised if he ends up as the biggest player out of this draft. And the reason I say this is he's going to take a little bit, but if he does pan out, his ceiling is astronomical based on, those measurables, those traits. And I guess the biggest thing is I don't really feel like he has the overall feel for the wide receiver spot, which is why they kind of want to move him more inline. That's going to take some development, and he's going to have to bulk up. He was at 219, 6'5". To me, if he were to go down that path at wide receiver and he got into that room with Eric Yarber, I think they could develop a legit receiver that has, kind of the embodiment of like a Chase Claypool mixed with like a Kenny Golladay. And keep in mind, Matthew Stafford, I've said this over and over again, he didn't really have a favorite target, but at one point he did, and that was Calvin Johnson. After Calvin Johnson, there wasn't really much of a favorite target after that. So going out and getting a 6'5" receiver for Matthew Stafford makes a lot of sense. He's a little raw though. So I think they, debated this pick, but the fact that, the reason that they made this pick is that he can instantly help them in special teams. They're brand new, special team coordinator from the Jaguars who they got. He was number 1 on the special teams board, Jacob Harris, according to the special teams coordinator. So I do think that had a lot to do with it, feeling like, all right, this guy's going to take a while. Doesn't make any sense to roster him. And when they look at his ability on special teams, he's 100% going to make the roster. And, they don't have anything to worry about there. So I actually really like the pick. There are other guys I would have preferred. Definitely Simi Fehoko is, right at top of the list. He went to Dallas, and keep an eye out for him. But I get it. He averaged 20.1 yards per catch during his UCF career. 9 of his 49 catches resulted in a touchdown. So, this is definitely somebody that, overall, if he pans out, he's got a huge ceiling. And with the talent around him, this isn't asking him to go into an organization and be the number 1 receiver. He can sit, wait, develop. And even if they barely use him this year and say they just use him in the red zone, that would be fine for me. If they had a legit red zone threat in him and they just used him at the goal line on those fades and it worked out, that would be fine for me. So I get the pick because, again, we're talking from the terms of, like I said, I believe the Rams feel very confident in their all-around team and they feel Super Bowl ready. This is the type of pick you make, a guy with a high ceiling, great measurables, and, a guy that's there in the 4th round. So I really don't hate this pick. At the time I was annoyed, but I never really hated it. I just think in the 4th round, it's just not the way that I would go. But the next pick in the 5th round, 174th overall, the Rams picked Ernest Brown IV, defensive end out of Northwestern, which I believe makes the Rams the team with the most Ernests in the NFL on their team, let alone in the same draft class. I don't know that there's ever been 2 Ernests in the same draft class. We'll have to confirm that at a different point in time. But here's the interesting thing about this pick. So I watch a lot of Northwestern football. I live in the Chicago area. My family likes Northwestern. They're not my team, but I do watch a lot of Northwestern games. Ernest Brown is not someone I was even really entirely familiar with at defensive end. I mean, the name somewhat rang a bell. And, as I started talking in the live stream, I realized I did know who he was, but he's not someone that I ever thought about. I never watched tape on him. I didn't think he was going to be drafted. He just, for whatever reason, never came across
my board or any of the film that I watched. I don't hate this pick. If you're talking about like talent wise, this isn't. I do think the 5th round is a little high for him. The position I understood. I do think he's more of a defensive end than like an edge guy. I think that the Rams are going to use him as an edge. But yeah, I mean, I didn't hate this. I was a little bit bummed because, again, I was hoping that we were going to go offensive line. Like every time the Rams dropped a pick, I was like, we have to go depth here. We got to like go security here. And they were making picks that I didn't quite understand. But I wasn't like, I was just kind of indifferent about this pick. Like it wasn't kind of like the others where I was really upset or like I really loved him. I was just indifferent about it. But Jake, what are your thoughts on Ernest Brown?
He looks the part. He's going to take over for the Morgan Fox role, or at least they think that. Kind of a poor athlete. I mean, again, has the size, but he's relatively slow. He struggles because he shows his hand. He's very easy to calculate. You know what he's going to do. His pass rush plan is pretty much the same thing. He leaves himself wide open. Obviously you don't want the offensive lineman to get your hands on you. He pretty much always lets that happen. So, I mean, watching his tape and going back, I don't really get this pick. I think it was honestly, they took a guy that kind of looks the part, like that tweener, that could be like a Morgan Fox. This is somebody that with coaching could probably surprise everybody, but I just feel like he got drafted simply off the fact that, I mean, obviously don't get me wrong, he played in college, but it helps when you were, a top high school recruit, and he was a, top 20 high school recruit at that position. So I do think that helped him. And I think the biggest issue with him is that he doesn't really offer much. Like people are talking about him being an edge. He's strictly going to play inside. Like he's like Fox, where Fox, you wouldn't use him as a stand-up outside linebacker. You would use him as a 5-tech defensive end. And that's to me what, Ernest Brown, the 4th, is going to be. I'm curious to see what the Rams saw in him, because clearly they saw something in him. I hope he does well. I'm just being honest. I don't really get this pick. He ran a 5.40. Like, again, you're dealing with a slow guy, doesn't have great overall lateral agility, explosiveness, things along that, those nature. But I hope he does well. I really didn't like this pick. I do think it ended up being the worst pick of the entire draft. And I know it's in the 5th round, but I mean, the 5th round, George Kittle was drafted in the 5th round. Desmond King was drafted in the 5th round. Very talented players get drafted all over the place. So, we can't just go by round and give them a pass. I don't feel like this was a good pick, to be honest with you.
Yep. And then the next pick, I lost here because this thing is tweaking.
Jake Funk, 233,
yeah.
7th round.
Yeah, so the next pick that the Rams made was Jake Funk, running back out of Maryland, in the 7th round. So again, this was position-wise, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate this position. I actually was kind of advocating for the Rams to take a running back at some point in the draft just for depth, because our 2 main guys are somewhat injury prone in Akers and Henderson. That's a reality. And the backup guys, like on the depth chart that we have, I actually like, but I just felt like we could have used some depth. And if there was some talent out there, we should have grabbed it. Again, I'll be honest, Jake Funk is not someone I was familiar with. So this pick was surprising to me. It wasn't even a name that I saw floating around, because there was a lot of names that I knew, even if I wasn't familiar with that player or watched anything about the player. I would still see, lists of names, and I never saw Jake Funk, but I think, Jake, you were familiar with him, or at least I know you are now. So what were your thoughts on this pick?
Yeah, I had a 6th round grade on Jake Funk, more of a special teamer. Look, they got good value, but I also feel like they could have gotten better value if they went with one of the guys that was in my top 10. I had 3 guys in my top 10 at running back still available on the board at this point. Puka Williams out of Kansas, I understand why he went undrafted. You have the off the field issues. Not going to fault them for that. But you have guys like Kylan Hill and Jamar Jefferson. Kylan Hill is just a total beast, great body composition, and great, contact balance. And then Jamar Jefferson had the best vision in the draft. So going out and getting Jake Funk was a little bit of a surprise for me. like I said, he's going to be a big special teams contributor. He did suffer 2 torn ACLs to the same knee, 2018 and 19. He's not really going to offer much, in pass pro, and he's not the greatest receiving back. So I kind of felt like this is just somebody that, will be used in the special teams game, and that's going to be where he needs to make his money. He absolutely exploded on the scene during the draft, the pre-draft process because of his pro day. I think that's when teams started to talk about him a little bit. And I mean, he looks the part. Like he has really good build for a running back. It's just this, with the guys there, I don't think it was the best pick. But again, I had a 6th round grade on him. They got in the 7th. So according to my board, they got value for him. I think they just could have gotten more had they gone with the other guy.
Yeah, and from what I've seen so far, I do agree. I think that he's going to be a special teams guy, which this would be the place to take a special teams guy, not in the 4th round, as I was saying earlier. So I have no problem with that pick. I agree. I think he's going to be a special teamer. And then if there's injuries, obviously he's going to come in. But the next pick, 249th overall in the 7th round, the Rams took Ben Skowronek, wide receiver from Notre Dame. And this, again, is another receiver, which I just can't believe we took 3 in the draft. This pick, listen, I really like Ben. I'm a Notre Dame fan. That's my team. He was really fun to watch with Notre Dame. However, the 2 things that I didn't really like about this pick were, one, obviously, position. I just felt like I couldn't believe we were going that position again. And also, 2, I do think that he's a special teams guy in the NFL. I think that he could make his way out of I think that he's developmental, but I think that part of the reason teams probably like him is he's a good blocker. I mean, he's a big guy. I think he definitely is going to contribute right away to special teams, but it was just confusing based on the players that we had already drafted. So I was bummed because it was like they picked someone from my school, Notre Dame, but they picked like the wrong Notre Dame player out of all the guys that I would have wanted. So that was kind of a bummer. But yeah, I think he's a good player. I think he's going to be a good special teams player. Again, if there's injuries, I'm not like terrified for him to play wide receiver for the Rams in the NFL in any way, but I just don't think that he's going to be looked at as anything other than a special teams player. But Jake, what are your thoughts on this pick?
I actually think there's some upside here with Skowronek. When I went back and I watched him, this is somebody that plays like he's 6'5" on the outside, does a great job of high pointing the football, will win that 50-50 ball. That might be his game. He might be a designated red zone threat, which would make sense. Sean McVay has struggled in the red zone historically. So to go out and get, a guy that plays like he's 6'5" and to get a guy that is 6'5", that honestly does check out. And maybe that's good. They're going to be used as kind of, keys to the puzzle a little bit. But, overall, Skowronek is going to be mainly a special teamer, but I do think he has upside to develop, especially because not only does he do a great job of running after the catch, he's got good body composition at 6'3", 211. But one thing that I really like about him is that he kind of low-key reminds me of Robert Tonyan. Tonyan kind of came out of nowhere, but Tonyan did a great job of blocking. He had an all-around game, and then eventually when he got his time, Rodgers was able to get him the football, and we saw what he could do. I'm not the only one to say that. Skowronek can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. He can play, go over the top, win above the rim, so to speak. But he can also block. And I think that's something that doesn't really get it's not really well said, but I mean, I think he is a really good blocker. I think he's an underrated blocker, and it makes sense going to Sean McVay's offense. He loves blocking. You look at Woods and Kupp, and to me, I think that's definitely a big key there. But also on top of it, I actually really like him as a route runner. So, people keep talking about this guy being raw. I wouldn't be surprised if, he takes a little bit, but when he gets going, like he can end up being a starting receiver someday. I mean, he honestly is a very intriguing pick. And I didn't love it at first because I was like, why'd you go receiver 3 times? And why'd you get him over some of the guys that I had listed? But I get it. I mean, he offers a lot. When you're looking for that hidden gem, a guy that, was pretty good in college, productive, but, maybe with better NFL coaching or what have you, he could find his stride. This is the guy. I'm definitely going to be watching him closely.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. And again, like I mentioned, Northwestern, he was actually at Northwestern before he transferred to Notre Dame. So I am, familiar with him. I do really like him. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the vibe is more special teams for now. But like you said, he could develop into something else. It's something to keep an eye on. But thankfully, we have a lot of depth at that position, so he doesn't need to, pan out right away. But the last pick that the Rams made in the 2021 NFL draft was 252nd overall in the 7th round. The Rams selected Chris Garrett, linebacker out of Concordia, St. Paul. Now, if you watched us live, we just were like, what the heck just happened? Like a guy that was not on my radar. I can't remember if he was on yours. I think you might have heard of him a little bit, but definitely an intriguing pick. Small school guys obviously get overlooked for obvious reasons. I think live, Jake, we looked up his testing and he tested well.
He tested okay. His 40 time wasn't the best, but he had a lot of good short area burst and, explosive drills. He did well in.
Yeah. So we kind of understood it. And again, this is at the very end of the 7th round. So when you get to this point, it really just is kind of okay, whatever happens, happens. And, there's not necessarily a wrong way you can go unless there's other players available that you're just oh my gosh, we need to have now. But yeah, and this pick has grown on both Jake and I. I do think this guy is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, underrated. I think that he's developmental, but I think he has a really high ceiling. I'll let Jake talk more about that. But as we've watched more from Chris Garrett, I understand why the pick was made. The position at the time was, again, a little confusing. But again, it's at the end of the 7th round. So there was really, the Rams could have done anything except take another receiver that I would have, and I would have been okay with it. But Jake, what are your thoughts on Chris Garrett?
Well, I ended up, I actually lied earlier. Chris Garrett's my favorite pick, and I think he's the best pick of their draft. He's got crazy potential. His college production was unreal in his 3 seasons. And that's what you want to see. You see all these small school guys getting touted, but then, you watch the film and you're like, I'm not really seeing them stand out. This guy stands out. He had 36.5 sacks, 48.5 tackles for loss, and 15 forced fumbles. He was a monster. He would win in multiple ways, had a good pass rush plan, was very physical. Trying to get my hands on, big time film, because that's pretty much all I could really find. I found a couple games. I'm trying to get all 22 actively. But I really like Chris Garrett. And the reason I like him so much is because this is the type of, pick you make in the 7th round. You go out and you get a guy that has crazy get off potential, all of that in the 7th round. And especially when you have an outside linebacker group of Obanai Okoronkwo, Derek Moncrief, Maximilian Roberts, Leonard Floyd, Terrell Lewis, Justin Lawler, John Daka, and Justin Hollins. I feel like he can make this roster and he can play over some of these guys. I mean, I have him definitely making the roster. I know there's some people that say he won't. I think Justin Lawler's gone, a 7th rounder in 2018. He's had a hard time staying healthy. I feel like Max Roberts is kind of just a guy. Chris Garrett, I think, is going to outplay Derek Moncrief. So really, I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams keep Leonard Floyd, Justin Hollins, Terrell Lewis, Obanai Okoronkwo, and then Chris Garrett, and maybe keep John Daka, who they just claimed from the Jets. But overall, I think this is it's a C- draft from me. And I think that Chris Garrett was one of the top 30 picks in this draft. We'll be talking about him in 3 years. I think he's going to be a good player. I think they really found a diamond in the rough. Hopefully they don't deal with him the way they did with John Franklin Myers.
Yeah. It was a C- draft for me as well. But I just think the combination of positional picks as well as the player value was just a bad mix. This draft, I just think that, the Rams passed on a lot of guys that have a lot more potential. I think they definitely kind of went after, quote unquote, their guys, which is a strategy. Some might argue it's a good strategy. Some might argue it's bad strategy. However, it's the one the Rams went with. So I think they basically said, there might be some safer options here, but we're going to go with some guys that we like. And that's what they did. So again, it seems so obvious to state, but you never know how a player is going to turn out until they start playing, and you have to give it time. You can't just decide on a player now. You can obviously give your opinion on what you saw from them and give predictions on how they're going to do. But obviously we have no idea if we're right about anything until the players actually start playing. So yeah, not exactly our favorite draft. I would say it was one of the worst ones that we've seen from the Rams in a while, which is a bummer because last year we both were really high on the Rams drafts. This year, not so much, but we'll see. Again, we hope we're wrong about all these players. We hope that they all perform really well and that the Rams obviously do really well. We're going to be back in a few days. The schedule release is tonight as we're recording this. So once we know the Rams schedule, Jake and I are going to go through the schedule in the next episode and give our predictions for each game and talk about those matchups. But until then, as always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheAlexisCraft. You can follow Jake at JKBoganDTSN. And we will see you guys next time. Stay safe. We'll be back in a few days. Until then, go Rams.
Get 20% off and free shipping with the code DTR at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and make sure to use code DTR. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.